The story of a Filipino family. Happy birthday with love flashing gold, from sparkling silver. By SIMEON G. Silverio, Jr. Publisher and Editor, Asian Journal. Reprinted from the Asian Journal July 26, 1997 issue. Not too many people reach their 85th birthday. In fact, among the contemporaries of my mother, FELISA Galang Silverio, I could not remember anyone older than her who is still alive. This is why we are thankful to God for this rare blessing and plan to make the most of the event today, July 6, 1997. It was only this year that I found out that my mother was born in Manila, a true-bred Manilena. All along, I thought she was born in Quilianan, Plaridel, Bulacan, the birthplace of my father, since they used to teach each other that as babies, their mothers, who were best of friends, used to put them together to play inside a pen, as the old folks played cards to while away the time. After the death of my father in December 1995, and after she was done with her project of beautifying his fenced tomb site, complete with comfort room for use during their all-day vigil on All Saints' Day, I asked her to write about her life to keep her busy and enable her to pass it on to us, her children, grandchildren and progeny. After all, she had retired as an English teacher in public school 20 years earlier. And lo, and behold, she was indeed born in San Miguel, Manila, although her parents, Pablo and Fabiana Galang, migrated from Bulacan. She spent her summers in Plaridel with her brothers and sisters, imbibing enough rural roots to enjoy the best of both provincial and urban worlds. She passed on to us the Bulacanos' acquired tastes for borong mustasa, preserved spinach, and borong manga, preserved mango, eaten with broiled catfish or mudfish, as well as borong talanca, salted, uncooked small crabs. She spent part of her youth in Pasay City, along the beach of the now famous Roxas Boulevard, as her father worked as a driver for a rich family and later for the National Waterworks and Sewage Authority, NAWASA, while her mom stayed home to take care of the family. Today, that beach is gone. A huge reclamation project was built on that part of Manila Bay where casinos, malls, entertainment centers, condominiums and other complexes are housed. She was one of the most ambitious among her brood. While her elder sister, Tia Manang, and the sister that came after my mother, Tia Chuling, dropped out of school and worked at a buttons factory to help out in the family's finances, my mother went to the Philippine Normal School along Taft Avenue besides Jayalai in Manila, to pursue a teaching degree. Sometimes, my father would pick me up, she recalled. And we would eat the delicious 50-centavo meal complete with rice and adobo with banana for dessert. That was before the war. At about that time, her future husband, Simeon Cervantes Silverio, left Bulacan to seek his fortune in Manila. His mother, Lorenza Cervantes, died when he was 10 years old, and his maternal grandmother, whom we only knew through his accounts as Inong Inta, took care of him and his 3 sisters. His father, Solomon Silverio, was assigned to different towns as a waterworks inspector. He remarried and got widowed again after bearing 5 more children. The children from the second family were raised together with the family of my father, as my grandfather went on to remarry again and raise a 3rd family. All in all, my paternal grandfather had 15 children. My father's grandmother had a penchant for business. She would store and sell rice by the sacks. Sometimes, whenever they did not have rice for food, she would ask my father to get 1 tablespoonful of rice each from as many sacks. That way, they would have their meal without the buyers of the sacks of rice noticing the missing amount. As a game expert, my paternal grandfather knew all the tricks of the trade. One time, when he was vacationing at our house, we would play mahjong all night. He would show us how to cheat and sometimes cheat on us so that we would learn the lesson. No matter. We were just using matchsticks as bets, anyway. The first time my father came to Manila in his late teens, he got a job as an apprentice and later full-time worker in the composing department of Economics Press and later the Bureau of Printing. This started the bloodline of printing business that is now running up to the 3rd generation in our family. He would be wearing white shark-skin suits and white shoes as he would court my mother in their house in Pasay. He would go home to Bulacan on Sundays and have his younger sisters wash his one and only suit. Whenever he would go back to Manila early Monday morning, he would ask his younger stepbrothers and sisters what they want him to buy for them when he comes back. Your dad, one of my uncles told me, would even trace our feet so that he would know the size of the shoes he would buy for us. But when he came back, there would be no shoes for us. He was just taking us for a ride. Despite these empty promises, his younger sisters and brothers look up to my dad as a father figure in the absence of their own father. After my mother obtained her associate degree in education at the Philippine Normal College, she went to Majayjay, Laguna to teach. Majayjay was a quaint little town, secluded from the outside world at the foot of Mount Banahaw. It was a paradise then, with dancing halls, century-old church and leisurely, fun-filled way of life. My mother would go home to her family on weekends who would wait for her at the train station each time. Unknown to them, my father had been visiting and courting her, taking the hour's train ride each time. Those were happy moments in their young lives. Their courtship was secret since my maternal grandfather was very protective of his daughter. This despite the fact that my mother was pushing 30 and way past the marrying age. But love is blind, as they say. My father and mother would secretly meet each other and exchange letters. To hide their relationship from my mother's family, my father would sign his letters Sparkling Silver, a pseudonym for his name SIMEON Silverio. Not to be outdone, my mother would pen her signature Flashing Gold after her name FELISA GALANG. When World War II broke out, my mother was already teaching at a public school in San Francisco del Monte, then a suburb of Manila. She was about to report to work when the Japanese planes started bombing some parts of Manila. The schools were closed and in an instant, she found herself without a job. Hell broke loose as she prayed inside the Espiritu Santo church where she was supposed to meet my father for a date. She heard the news that the Bureau of Printing was bombed and she was worried for her boyfriend. After many anxious hours, she was relieved to see him safe. Those were uncertain times. They were not sure whether they could survive the day. They did not know whether they could stay together or part ways forever. At one time, when my mother received a counterfeit bill from a vendor, my mother was interrogated at the Fort Santiago. When she was brought inside, passing the dungeons where prisoners were being tortured, she was not sure whether she would ever get out alive. After several harrowing moments, she was found innocent and eventually released. She heaved a sigh of relief when the first person she saw waiting outside was my father. That was the last straw. Afraid that they would never be together if they waited longer, they eventually decided to get married. But asking for the hands of my mother would be impossible for my father to do. Her father still disliked my father and there's no way a marriage permission could be granted. And so, my father and my mother did the next best thing, they eloped. After all, they were already in their 30s. With the help of my father's cousin, Domingo Mapue, and 2 other companions who stood as wedding sponsors, they got married in a church, with only the 5 of them and the priest in attendance. My mother would not forget that simple and austere wedding. She was very sad because her loved ones like her parents, brothers and sisters were not in attendance. She was just wearing a simple dress, not a wedding gown. There were no bridal entourage or wedding guests. Their future, with the war still raging and the country occupied by the Japanese forces, was very dark. After the wedding, they went to a Chinese pansiteria in Chinatown to celebrate the occasion. My mother would make sure she would make up for that bittersweet experience. When they reached their silver wedding anniversary on their 25th year of marriage, our printing business was already booming. She threw a big party and they renewed their wedding vows in a more elaborate and grand wedding ceremony. With their teenage children, the boys in their shiny, Marzotto suits, the girls in their pink gowns, as wedding sponsors. On their golden wedding anniversary to celebrate their 50th year of marriage, some of their children flew in from the United States to join the celebration, with everyone, including the littlest grandchild, participating in a grand ceremony and renewal of vows held at the luxurious Admiral Hotel along Roxas Boulevard in Manila. My father was already in a wheelchair, unable to speak and could hardly move after suffering from a stroke 12 years earlier and was crying all the time. But everyone was thankful that they reached their golden years. Exactly 9 months after they got married, my mother gave birth to their eldest son, Salvador. He was named after a cousin and best friend of my father who acted as a bridge when he was courting my mother. When the cousin died of tuberculosis when he was in his 20s, his parting words were, "Simeon, ikaw na ang bahalang tumapad sa ating mga pangarap." Simeon, make sure you fulfill our dreams. I am sure my father succeeded in his assigned task. The eldest child, whom he named after his close friend, grew up to be a medical doctor while the rest of his brood also became professionals. Those were hard times. The year was 1943 and the Philippines was still under the Japanese occupying forces. Supplies were scarce and my elder brother, as a baby, had to live on sugar and water for the lack of milk. When she was pregnant with her second child, Felicita, my mother realized that they could not achieve their dreams on her teaching salary and her husband's Bureau of Printing's pay alone. She had to make a move. She encouraged her husband to put up their own business, using their savings to buy a 1 Minerva letterpress machine. Thus, when their second child was born on January 1, 1946, Silverio Press was also opened for business. It was a difficult, but somewhat humorous start-up. They rented a small space in Cataluna Street in Sampaloc, Manila, but did not have enough money to pay for the electricity. Hence, my father's younger stepbrother had to manually pull up and push down the brace of the Minerva machine for it to move and print their first jobs. Eventually, when business started coming in, electricity was installed. When I was born on December 18, 1947, we were already settled in Papan, Sampaloc, Manila, between Dapitan and Layong Lan streets. Across the street was the house of our maternal grandparents, while around us lived the families of my mother's brothers and sisters. Hence we grew up playing with our cousins and celebrating special occasions with relatives. By then, the printing press had moved to its present location on Plateria Street near Quirito and Quiapo, Manila. The business rapidly grew as printing machines were added to increase production. Relatives and barrio mates of my parents from Plaridel, Bulacan worked in the printing press and moved on to better jobs after acquiring the necessary skills. Eventually, we had to move to the second floor of the printing press as the volume of business required an almost 24-hour operation. Those were hectic days. During December, the business could hardly keep up with the orders for calendars as giveaways during the holiday season by different businesses. Eventually, the printing press became big enough to publish books. My parents started buying properties as investments, some in Las Piñas, Rizal and others in Bulacan. Their income was augmented by the rental properties they owned. We were one of the 2 families in our clan who owned a car. By that time, my mother was teaching at the Juan Sumulong Elementary School, then later at the Isabelo de los Reyes School, where she retired at the age of 65 in 1977. When she retired, my mother was given the choice to take a lump sum retirement pay or have a lifetime retirement pay. She took a gamble and chose the latter. She won. In the long run, she got a much bigger amount because after 20 years and counting she was still collecting her lifetime pension. Many of her contemporaries did the same but passed away 5 years after retirement. Those who chose the lump sum pay found themselves without any more money years after retirement. My mother would never run out of money to put on her time deposit nest at the Mani de Piedad Bank. She will receive her pension the rest of her life. When a bank run forced the old, venerable bank partly owned by the Catholic Church to declare a bank holiday, she transferred some of her savings to the old, reliable government-run Philippine National Bank. A week later, an employees' strike hit the PNB. Oh well. Lugi na hoang gobierno sa inyo ha, the government has already been shortchanged on you. We would tease her as we were having breakfast on the terrace of our house in Quezon City last December. As usual, the reliable postman was downstairs calling out, "Lola, heto na hoang pension ninyo, Grandma, here's your pension." The maid would pick it up and give it to our mother and let her sign the logbook. She would have that smile of a cat that ate the mouse, one who was having the last laugh. She would ask the maid to get her bag inside the cabinet, pick a few pesos and give it to the maid to be given to the postman. "Abba, may tip pa, there's even a tip." We would continue to tease her. The money would not get warm in her hands. Right away, she would give it to my sister to be deposited in her time deposit, to earn interest as early and as much as possible. For years we had stopped giving gift money to our mother. We found out that she would not spend them on herself but deposit it right away. She enjoyed watching her money grow. "She has everything she needed," she said. "A loving family, maids who jumped to follow her orders at her beckon. She is not wanting of material needs, as she remained the simple girl with simple wants my father married years ago. In fact, we found out that we, her children, were the ones occasionally needing her help. Whenever we need capital for projects, we would go to her. "What do you want?" All she would ask. "Pesos or dollars?" She has deposits in both currencies. Sometimes, I wonder how my mother was able to raise all of us. I am now a parent, myself, and with my 3 daughters, I could hardly cope up. My mother? She had 7 of us children and she was holding on to a full-time teaching job in addition to assisting in our family business. Of course, she always had 3 or 4 maids to assist her at any given time. But we always felt that she was always there for us. When I was young and sickly, I remembered her bundling me up early at dawn. We would take a jeepney on Dapitan Street and go to Luneta, a huge park beside the sea, where she would let me take in the fresh air from the bay to boost my health. On Sundays, when we were already residing in downtown Manila in Quiapo, she would do the marketing and cooking herself. She would wake me up at dawn and we would hear the first Mass at the Quiapo church before the two of us would proceed to the nearby Quinta market. We would buy fresh fish and live chicken, which she would butcher and cook for lunch. I missed her chicken curry made of tender, young de Malaga, young native chicken and newly grated fresh coconut milk, and the small, onion fish cooked in tomato which was our staple food at that time. In the elementary school, we always went to school with our mother who was teaching at the place. We would be brought and picked up by the family driver in our big family car, a 7-seater 1949 Dodge limousine bought from a former senator. Anak ni Mrs. Silverio, a CHLD of Mrs. Silverio, our fellow students and teachers would refer to us. And that would open doors for us. One time, I found myself without a project to work on during work education period in grade 3. My fellow students who did not also have any project were punished. Me? My teacher, a close friend of my mother, asked me to go to my mom's class next room and borrow a project from one of her pupils. Years later, I realized that it was a bad example to teach a young pupil. But my teacher was more concerned of her friendship with my mother than teaching us a good moral lesson. What can I say? When you have it, you have it. During the Christmas time, we always have the most beautiful lantern in the neighborhood. Why? Because my mother would choose the best lantern submitted by her pupils as a school project and take them home when the school closes for the holidays. It was always an honor for her students to have their works chosen. On Wednesdays, my mother would take us in the family car to hear Mass at the Baclaran church. We would buy a whole head of lechon, roast pig, for dinner each time. This practice only stopped when years later, my father developed high blood pressure for eating too much cholesterol. On Fridays, my father would take us to Clover Theater, which was just walking distance away from our house, to watch the stage show's presentations. There was no television yet at that time, and aside from radio and movies, it was one of the forms of entertainment. On Saturdays, it was time for our parents to have their date. Iskram Kami, a loose translation of escape, they would tell us. They enjoyed Hollywood movies of Susan Hayward, Clark Gable and others, never the Tagalog films, although my father and I would occasionally watch the sword films of Efren Reyes and Johnny Montero. We enjoyed those evenings when they were out because we have the house all for ourselves. We, the kids, would play city. We would divide the play money among ourselves and play city folks roles, selling products or services. My sisters would play storekeepers and I would always play the taxi driver, giving passengers a ride on my taxi, which was usually a chair pushed while lying on its back on the floor without wheels. My objective then was to earn all the money in circulation by being paid for the services I rendered. I didn't realize that they were only play money, and while I got to get all of them by doing hard work, my brothers and sisters enjoyed all the rides for nothing. Later, I drew with a piece of paper and a pencil the city's newspaper. We would stay awake till our parents arrived past midnight because they always brought home big special sayapaus, buns with meat as fillings, for late evening snacks. The big sayapaus would have bola meat and salted eggs inside. On Sundays, we never failed to go out. In the big family car, we would go to the province or to the Quezon Memorial Circle where we would catch grasshoppers to feed our Martinez bird. During summertime, our parents would pack us off for a month-long vacation in the province to enjoy the country atmosphere that they used to enjoy as kids. In 1963, the roof caved on us. My father was implicated in a check counterfeit case and our printing press was confiscated by the National Bureau of Investigation. He was so trusting that one Sunday, he gave the key of the press to a friend who used it for illegal means. Those were some of the dark days in our lives, but my mother stood behind my father through all those travails. The case dragged on for years, and during that time, my father had no business with which to earn a living. He subcontracted all the printing jobs to different printing press companies and he could hardly eke out a profit. We had already moved to our own house in Quezon City and a land which my mother bought on an installment basis when she was still single. It was indeed a trial period, as many of my father's friends, with whom he co-founded the Philippine Printers Association, turned their back on him. My mother sold some of her properties to tide us over. It took almost 5 years before my father was exonerated and the printing press machines were returned to us. But the damage had already been done. We could not relive the good years we had before. In the end, however, my mother took it philosophically. Ito ay isa lamang pagsubok, this is just a test from God, she declared. We would gladly take it in place of other misfortunes like losing the life of a family member. Indeed, some of their friends had suffered their own misfortunes in form of deaths, wayward children or marital separations. Through all those ordeals, our family remained intact and more importantly, safe. To commemorate our vindication, my mother bought a life-sized image of Jesus Christ symbolizing his rebirth on Easter Sunday, the resurrection or Muling Pe Kabui. Our family had a new lease in life, she said. During fiesta times in the barrio in the province where we owned properties, that image is brought out to participate in religious processions. In 1981, my parents toured the United States for the first time in their lives. It was an opportune occasion, because they were able to enjoy the different sights while they were still healthy. Our cousins Carding Cipriano and Angelita Cipriano Agravant brought them to different places and they were able to visit my wife and first daughter whom I had not yet personally seen as I was left behind in the Philippines awaiting for the approval of my immigrant petition. From then on, they went back and forth to visit the U.S., particularly Guam where one of my sisters is settled. It was harvest time for them, time to enjoy life. All of their children had already finished college, the first and last were medical doctors, 2 were commerce graduates, 1 a journalist, another a lawyer and the other an agriculture course graduate. It was certainly a fulfillment of every parent's cherished dreams. In 1986, tragedy struck when my father, at the age of 74, suffered a stroke. He could not speak and could hardly walk. Despite intensive therapy, with 2 doctors attending to him, he never recovered. He and my mother were able to visit us here in California in 1987, but he was never the same. Always the life of a party, one who cracked jokes every time, his loss of speech took a heavy toll. If he could only talk, he would have enjoyed the rest of his life better even if he was confined in a wheelchair. The misfortune, however, gave my mother a chance to serve my father well. And boy, did she serve him well. She took seriously the 3 marital vows she uttered, first during their marriage, second during their silver wedding anniversary and third during their golden wedding anniversary. To love and to cherish, in sickness and in health, for richer and for poorer, till death do us part. From the start, she fed him spoon by spoon 5 or sometimes 6 or 7 times a day. She gave him a bath each day, stayed beside him and kept him company all day and all night. She even built a makeshift elevator in our house, so he could easily be brought down. It was frustrating to talk to a person who could not talk back. We found this out when we were trying to talk to my father over the phone on overseas calls. But not to my mother. She kept talking and talking to him to prevent him from getting bored in life. When I was staying with them on vacation visits which I did every year since 1991, I sometimes found them alone by themselves, in the terrace or in the room, with my mother talking to him by herself. Others would have given up. In fact, my own dad, I sensed had already given up. But not my mother. She was serving him until the last moment. They said that a victim of a debilitating stroke could only last 5 more years at most. My father lasted 10 more years, double the usual average. And this was because of my mother's persistence to be of service to him. One time when he was still in his 60s and healthy, I overheard my father telling a friend that he could reach the age of 80 if my mother was still around. He was right. When he finally passed away on December 11, 1995. I told my mother over the phone during an overseas call that at least, my father would have the rest he long time deserved. My mother agreed, but said, "Pero iba na rin ang nandirito siya, it is still different if he is here," as though the hardships she suffered in serving him was not enough. Just like the San Miguel beer commercial, she was still asking Isa Panga. One more time, during their golden wedding anniversary held on January 2, 1993, they were married January 16, 1943, my mother summoned all her children and grandchildren to participate in the ceremony. At that time, the wedding of a Filipino superstar was dubbed by the press as the wedding of the year. But the officiating priest shrugged it off, noting that the superstar had lived in relationships with several men, was married once before and was marrying again. Wedding of the year? The priest asked. "This is the wedding of the year," he said, pointing to my mother and my father who was crying in the wheelchair. They vowed to love and to cherish each other, in sickness and in health, for richer and for poorer, till death do us part 50 years ago. And they have fulfilled their vows. After my father had passed away, my mother supervised the construction and beautification of his tomb site, as though her service to him was not yet over. She never got tired of watching over and over again the videotape of her golden wedding and her husband's memorial services. She dug out her old files to make new photo albums and out of nowhere, she found an old anniversary greeting card given to her by her husband some 30 years ago, that says, "Dearest Flashing Gold, I will always love you, Sparkling Silver." Flashing Gold was their moniker for my mom, FELISA GALANG. Sparkling Silver for my dad, SIMEON Silverio. Since his death, my doctor brothers, Buddy and Greg, together with their wives who are also doctors, had been bringing their doctor friends to our barrio in Plaridel, Bulacan every birth anniversary of my father on July 10th. There, for one whole day, they render free medical services to our barrio mates in memory of my father. Today, July 26, 1997, we will celebrate the 85th birthday of our beloved mother in our house in Chula Vista in San Diego, California. It will be attended by our relatives and friends from all over and will serve as an occasion for us to thank God for the blessings He had bestowed on our family. I know that up there in heaven, a dashing young man, in his one and only white sharkskin suit and shoes, not the haggard and tired old man in a wheelchair, is flashing his usual ear-to-ear grin and saying, "Happy birthday, my dearest Flashing Gold. I will always remain your Sparkling Silver who will love you forever and ever, AJ."